Welcome back. I am excited to be here with my friends today, Elise Daly Parker and Alana Kuwabara. And today we are talking about how to raise grownups that you, yes, you, the parent, like, and that other grownups will like. But before we get started, I want to hear from you guys about what you are loving right now. Alana, can you go first?
Why, yes, I can. So I have been on the hunt for some sneakers. I own one pair of sneakers and they're like athletic type sneakers. And I have really been struggling. I'm actually turning, well, I don't know when this will air, but I'm turning 39 this year. So it's like there's certain sneakers that are not, they're cool, but as soon as if I put them on, they won't be cool anymore. But I also don't want you know, to go too far beyond my years. So I found the perfect sneaker at Zara. It's this sock
Cute.
It's
sock
very
sneaker.
cool.
Sock
It
sneaker boot.
it is so comfortable. Like you feel like you're walking on a cloud. And I literally am enjoying when I have them on, like wherever I am, just for a moment, I'll go, oh yes, my feet feel so good and I look cool. And young people have commented on my shoes.
Ooh.
So I just feel like I
Ooh.
really hit the jackpot. And I had a Christmas gift card. Otherwise, I would not have spent the money on these. But
Oh, I like that.
thanks, Nana.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
I'm always
Thanks,
trying to
Nana.
figure out, like I have my kids come into my closet and I'm like, all right, tell me what I need to get rid of. Tell me what I have no business wearing. Tell me, please help
That's
me.
good.
They're like, hey, didn't you have this when we were little? And I'm like, yeah.
Oh, I
Mind your
love that.
business.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't like.
So one of the things I'm loving right now is actually Green Chef. So
Mm.
every January I do a Daniel fast. So again, depending on when this airs, we are in January right now. And it just takes all the guesswork out of preparing meals. So I sign up for the vegan version, which I've been using it for years, but this time around, it's just been so helpful. And for me, fasting for a long time was it became all about the food that I was allowed to eat, what I wasn't allowed to eat. I'd stress out. Over the years, I've modified it. So there's a certain way that I'm fasting this year. That's Daniel and whatever. But it makes it easy. It no longer is about the food, and it really becomes a time when I can connect with God, draw closer to Him. I don't have to stress out about like, am I going to have to eat like raw veggies to like blue in the face, or can I actually like have fun with what I eat and stick to the plan? And yeah, so I'm loving that. I've been doing it for a number of years, but I'm so grateful for it. And my family is too. I just throw protein on it and they can have it. They don't love it. They certainly would love to have other meals for dinner, but this is what we got and it works. So
Say it again. What is it?
Green Chef. So it's like
Mm.
any of those meal prep services. I started with them years ago because they were the only one that had a vegan meal plan. Now I think most of them do, or they all do. And I've just stuck with them.
Love it. I'm loving that you're doing that.
Mm.
And I'm loving the idea of doing that.
Love
Mhm.
that for you.
Yeah, I love
That's amazing.
no, I actually I do want to make more vegetarian meals this year. That's
Mhm.
one of my things, which my daughters are so happy about. But I am actually loving that this Christmas wasn't ready to let go of the season. And yet it was time to take down the tree and all that stuff. So I instead have done some winter, I've left some things that are, borderline, but I've also added a couple of not Christmas, winter-esque, like a bowl with some big, what are they called? Birch candles and
Mhm.
a little bit of lights wrapped around there. So yeah, I'm loving keeping some sense of the holiday spirit without hanging on to the holidays.
Yeah, I love that because
Right.
Christmas shouldn't be the only time you decorate or
Yeah.
like change the decoration in your home or the schemes or the pops of color. I love that.
Yeah.
Or the Febreze scent. That's
Yes.
usually mine.
That too.
Oh, it's spring. Time for a new Febreze scent in the bathroom.
I am trying to coordinate my candles now with the season
Oh,
for
me too.
sure. And I
Yes.
love Target's whatever their standard line is. I love it. And so I've
A
got
lot
quite a
of
few
people
now.
do. People
Mhm.
Yeah,
love that.
very
Yeah,
good.
I
Mhm.
change my candles up always. Like
Mhm.
I still have those wintry smells and I love them. I'll move into spring and I do more grapefruity stuff. And I
Mhm.
do the same thing with hand soap and stuff like that. I switch them
Yeah.
out.
Oh, I like that.
It's refreshing.
Yeah. All right. So let's move on to talk about kids. Now, Alana, this was your idea. I'm going to pin this one on you. And I thought this was a great thing to talk about. Real quickly, I just want to, Jordan Peterson talks a lot about this concept of raising kids that you will like. And one of the things that he says is that parents are the arbitrators of society. They teach children how to behave so that other people will be able to interact in meaningfully and productively with them. And so we know that by nature, we would not do the right thing. By nature, our kids, don't they have no boundaries. They would want to do what they want. Even as adults, we do that. And so there is something to be said for teaching them how to have self-control, set boundaries so that they can be responsible adults, so they can be productive adults, so that like we'll like them as we grow older with them and that other people will like them. So that's what we're going to talk about today. What does that mean to be a child that we like, that other people like? What are the benefits of it? And what are some of those attributes that we see in kids that are likable? And this isn't, and I just want to say one thing, it's not from a sort of pat on the back viewpoint. It's like we're setting them up for success by taking these things seriously. And so,
True.
what does it look like to do that? What are your thoughts on that?
Mm. Well, I think I like the distinction, first of all. I also think we're setting them up for success. We're also not doing it so that we feel good about the children I mean, of course, on some level, but it's not just about that. How can
Mhm.
I make them look good so I look good? It's really about how can I develop traits in them that will carry them far.
Mhm. Yeah. And
Yeah.
certainly as our kids get older, like I do, as I'm starting to transition into friendship stages with my oldest, I I'm thrilled to see that she has some attributes that I really enjoy, that like
Mm.
I would actually like her if she wasn't mine.
Yes, that's
That's
good.
the goal. I think, for me, this concept, part of this concept actually came out of necessity because we have, my husband and I have just always been very busy people. And so, we needed to be able to take our kids anywhere.
Mm.
And so neither of us was willing to take our kids to places and have them have temper tantrums or not be able to be left, alone or, with a coloring book or something like that, or whatever it is. It was out of necessity for who we wanted to be as a family and, just who we wanted them to be when we're out and about.
Mhm.
I never wanted to be, I didn't really grow up wanting to have kids or fantasizing about being a mom, but I knew that I did not want to be the mom in the grocery store with the kid throwing the temper tantrum on the floor.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so, I think that kind of necessity side of it can be informative as long as, like what you've both said, it doesn't become about your children needing to perform in a certain way so that you feel validated by other grown-ups. It's for their benefit that they're people that you like. And
Mhm.
it's for society's benefit, like Peterson was saying. Everybody benefits when you raise kids that you like and that grown-ups
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
as well.
Mhm. Well, I can think of times when, a mom's whole day is derailed because they've given in to what their kids want and what their kids have demanded or how their kids have behaved, and they end up losing, because they haven't set the boundaries, they haven't cultivated certain attributes in their children that make it possible for them to do the things that they need to get done. There are very real things that we would miss out on if we continue to let our kids sort of run the show, behave the way they want to behave, and I don't know, like it goes back to maybe necessity or stubbornness, but I'm not willing to let that happen.
Yeah,
I
we
just,
are. Go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, that first time, just in the way of kind of trying to navigate this, because I know it can be so difficult. But if you're in the early stages, that first temper tantrum or that first, just outright defiance, and you have that reaction. In our house, it was like the first time's a freebie, but we're going to address this, make sure that this is not the standard that
Yeah.
we're living by.
Yeah. So what are some of the other benefits you think of raising kids that people like, that we like?
Just being able to have great conversations. I mean, I'm assuming that's part of what makes us like them
Mhm.
is being
Spending
able
time
to,
with them.
interact with them and have good conversations and, making that part of, certainly that was part of what we did as a
Mhm.
family. We had conversations. We had a table that we sat around and we had a talking spoon so people got a chance to talk and that was very, so I think that's really important. I think also depending on how you're training them, one of the things that we want to cultivate is people that are interested in other people,
Mhm.
and that makes for conversation interesting and less
Mhm.
self-centered. And why isn't anybody talking to me? Well, you can talk to them and you can ask them a question.
Mhm.
That kind of equipping, I think, is really important.
Yeah. When the kids are little, I know that it's likely, my guess is, I know this, I can't think of anybody in particular, actually. Well, maybe I can. You can ask for more play dates when your kids are compliant, obedient, and likable.
Yeah.
Like you just do,
True.
especially in those early years when my kids were really young, and like the mom came along to the play date, like my very lifeline of who was going to be willing to hang out with me did have a little bit to do with whether or not my kids were well mannered, whether or not they actually like respected another person's home and things, and whether or not they
Sure.
threw a temper tantrum, or whether they were like, I'm not eating what you're making me. Like what are some of those things that would cause you to be like, it's really difficult to spend time with that family. Maybe we do that a little less. And that's unfortunate, especially if you really like those grownups or you really need those relationships or those friendships. So I think one of the benefits is that you're included in more things because, like you said,
True.
Alana, earlier, out of necessity, the, you know, that interaction and the things that you need to do, you can trust and rely on your kids to bring them along.
I totally agree with that. It's such a difference when you have kids over to your house and they're a joy, and you
Mhm.
enjoy that these other kids are in your home,
Mhm.
and you don't feel like you have to be on top of them the whole time,
Mhm.
and it's just a completely different experience. But and I also think I think about the fact that one day my kids are going to be out there in the world without me, and you know it's just benefits everybody to raise kids that other people are going to like,
Mhm.
that are going to walk into a room and be a calming force, or be people who can bring out the best in other people, who
Mhm.
care for others. I mean, we just need more and more, as much of that as we can get. If you're going to have kids and if you're going to bring human beings into this world, let's send them out there as agents of good and
Mhm.
love and care and good conversationalists, like you're saying, Elise, that,
Mhm.
people want to have around. Of course, of course.
Mhm.
And
I
I
think
think
it's getting there. That's the tricky
that's
part.
it. I talked about this recently on I think I did a little reel on it, training versus trying. It's
Mm.
like,
Oh, I loved that. That was really
oh,
good.
thank you. Learned that from my counselor, Suzanne,
Thanks,
because it's
Suzanne.
true. It's like um, trying you're gonna wear out, and it's just gonna be like, well, I'm trying to make this change, but we are training our children to go out into the world, and this
Mhm,
is a really good example of equipping them.
mhm,
I think about like teaching them to yes, be polite and kind, but also to be able to speak up for themselves,
mhm,
to be able to initiate a conversation. I think about job interviews and how hard those can be if you're not used to speaking to adults. So I think exposing our kids to adults is really important. All that, it just the benefits multiply. They just
Mhm.
they just and they stay with them for the rest of their lives. So we are doing our kids a favor when we really work on training them to be to be people that are liked, and people that show enthusiasm and passion and humor and all, whatever, Alana, as you talk about, whatever is in them, to kind of bring that out, help them bring that out, and make themselves appear that way in the world as they, I'm saying this so badly, to magnify their gifts, basically,
It's
to
good.
train them to magnify their
yeah,
gifts and
great.
Mhm.
go out there with them and share them.
Yeah. And I think it takes big picture thinking to understand the benefits that you could have. I find that the more likable, and we'll get into some of the traits in a moment, but the more, articulate someone is, or the more respectful someone is, they're going to get opportunities that other people aren't going to get. I feel like I definitely have seen, even in my community, like where we live, there's opportunities to meet people, engage with people who are, like, for example, we live right outside New York City. And so there's a lot of people that commute into the city, and they have a lot of different types of jobs. And there's certain jobs that really, if you're a child, if you're a high school student, or even a middle school student, and you build a rapport and a relationship with the people in this area that are doing something that you see yourself doing in the future, you're going to have more opportunities than somebody who isn't likable and who can't hold a conversation and who doesn't want to be bothered with grown-ups when they're taken by their parents to a social event, or who doesn't, pay attention. Like their future, we keep talking about like the future, and that's the important part of it, is like stepping back and saying, okay, I'm in this situation with my child now. What am I willing to give up in order for there to be a future result that's more beneficial to them than giving them what they want right now?
Mm-hmm. And you're talking about really helping them to understand that we're a community and that we're connected.
Hmm.
And I think that's a really important, again, benefit of teaching them these skills.
Hmm. Yeah. All right. So we can go down the list. Let's talk about some of these skills, these traits that we're talking about. And really, I mean, my, I have to be honest, a lot of these things I didn't have when I came out of school and I kind of became an adult. Like I really got by with a lot of lazy habits because I just wasn't taught them. I mean, I don't think I was a bad kid. I wasn't, whatever. But I really wasn't taught these things on purpose. And I feel like the first couple of years out of school, I was really at a disadvantage. And so these are, yes, things we want to be cultivating within our kids, but also we can work on these ourselves. So who wants to go first?
Well,
Oh,
I would say, again, for me, it's really important that my kids learned how to engage in adult conversation, that when somebody spoke to them, they looked them in the eye, they responded. And I definitely had, I mean, all my kids would say they were introverts, and yet they were trained to be able to do this, and all of them can really interact well with adults. So I think that engagement for me was really important, teaching them to really be interested in other people and learn to ask questions. And I was, interestingly, Kimberly, I was exposed to that because my father took me to conventions when I was young. And you would either sit at a table like a fool next to these adults, or you would engage.
Mm.
I had to learn, even at 14, to talk to these adults, men and women at a table. And it was hard for me, I'm not going to lie, but it really taught me something. And I think that's why it was really important to me that I pass that on to my kids as well. Builds
Mhm.
confidence.
Mhm.
Absolutely. I'm right with you. We would actually have, we don't do it as much anymore. We do it, for in kind of new situation. My son just turned 8. My daughter will be 11 in July. But we would talk to them in the car usually before we got somewhere. Okay, we're going to go into this place and there's going to be grown-ups there and they're going to want to talk to you. They're going to say, "Hi, how are you?" And you're going to look at them in the eye. You're going to speak up so that they can hear you, because that's something that frustrates us. And when you can't hear children, and ours in particular, and you're going to ask them how they're doing, and so we would have these conversations and sometimes it would not go very well. And you'd have to regroup and go, okay, we're going out to this place again, we're going to church, or we're going to the office or whatever. Okay, remember how we're working, so you have to remind yourself too, but to remind yourself to remind them, like, remember, okay, we're working on our introductions. Okay, when someone says, "Hey, how are you?" they're so excited to see you.
Yeah.
It is such a blessing to them that, so many grownups, we love to see kids. We love to see little kids and their cute little outfits and the cute little ways that they talk. We get so excited. And so teaching your kids to respond to that, give them, that's part of that conversational, like, give and take. And it's funny because, like, people will go to classes and workshops and read books on communication as an adult, but we can teach our children these things too. So that's my little add-on from Elise. But I also think some of the other traits are, besides the basic please and thank you, although I've heard from other parents just how amazed they are, my kids saying please and thank you. And my kids surprised me as well. So I don't know how much credit I can take for it, but they are they're very grateful kids. And that gratitude really goes a long way with others, with other adults, as well as with me. Oh, I wrote a little note down about obedience and self-control in regards to energy. I just think, those kids who aren't bouncing off the walls the entire time. Kids are going to be kids, and that, there's biological factors to that, and they have all this energy. But I think one of those traits kids that grownups like is kids that can just chill and, like, read the room. We'll say that to the kids sometimes, like, read the room. Like, we're not doing that right now. Everybody's chilling. Get a book.
That's good.
Like,
Reading the
sit
room is a
down.
good skill.
Yes. Yes. Years ago, I was at an event or a party or something at a friend's house, and one of the women had, like, I think the child was trying to interrupt. And we've developed some techniques for that, right? We taught our kids, if you need to interrupt, you put your hand on my arm, and then when I will put my hand on your hand to let you know I know you're there, but you need to wait until I'm done speaking. These non-interrupting tactics. But her child was trying to get in on the conversation, and she turned to him and she says, "I need you to stop right now and practice self-control." And I was like,
Great.
ooh, I didn't like that at the time. I was like, oh my gosh. But then after a while, I said it to my kids once or twice, and I was like, ooh, I like this. And I even at one point was like, okay, practice self-control, put your hands together, and just put them on the table. And just that physical act of just folding your hands for just a moment, switch the energy. But self-control is important, and it's so important for them to have it. Like, I feel like we definitely live in a culture where we want to do everything that feels good, that seems right. Um, why shouldn't I be able to do what I want to do? I'm not hurting anybody. Well, sometimes you sort of are. But practicing self-control and restraint is really a positive thing. It takes more to practice that self-control than it does to just act on our impulses. So it's actually a braver thing, or like there's more character involved in that than there is in just feeling their way about a situation and be able to do whatever they want to do. And so that's such a great skill.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Agreed.
I never was good at that, the signal, the get my attention signal thing.
Mhm.
And honestly, that's something that we still are actively working on,
Mhm.
because that's a good one. That just
Mhm.
like, and then they're
Yeah.
like, but they're not saying anything, but they're there, and they're like,
Yes, yes, yes. And it goes back to reading the room. If I'm in the middle of a conversation, give me the moment. Don't interrupt me. I mean, I struggle with interrupting people, and I'm really, that's a habit I still have to break.
I've known you a long time. I don't notice that habit, but that's
Oh,
interesting.
have a chat with my husband. He'll set you straight.
But that's a good one too. To teach our children not to interrupt is
yeah.
gold. It is.
Mhm, mhm. And
Which is
that,
hard because I come from a family where, like, around the dinner table, everyone's talking on top of each other all the time, laughing as loud as you can, just
mhm,
like reaching for stuff. And I married a man whose family is the exact opposite.
Interesting.
And so that's taken some time to get into the
mhm.
middle of
Yeah.
wherever that is.
Oh, I bet. Well, that leads us to humility.
Yes.
The ability to humble ourselves, to not interrupt, to, yeah, I mean, I think that underscores a lot of what we're talking about. Understanding that we're not the only person in the room, that we're not the only person that's invested in whatever it is that we're doing. We're not the only one that cares about being here. Like, I think of, my son, he's so funny. He would say, Mom, like, if I picked him up from a play date, and the moms start chatting, Mom, are you done chatting? And I'm like, excuse me. I'm like, I make time for you to see your friends. I would like you to respect me and my time where I'm interacting with my friends. Like, I needed that just as much as he did. Again, going back to my necessity, I wanted to train my kids to allow me to actually talk to grownups, because I was at home, stay at home mom by myself, not interacting with other adults. And I was not going to have you interrupt my time to get filled up and just get a little bit of refreshment that I needed. And so that was something I really made a point for my kids to understand. Like, yeah, you're here to see your friend, but I also like his mom, and we're talking about something right now. And that's just as important for you to play with your friends as it is for me to play with my friends.
Amen. It's true. I think another way to help our kids learn is some boundary stuff, without being rude, but to learn that it's a delicate balance, because on one hand, we want them to be engaged, we want them to be good conversationalists, polite, all those things. But on the other hand, they they also need to learn how to be okay with not necessarily answering every question that comes their way. I'm not even sure how to equip them to do this, but
Mhm.
I think it's a kind of what I'm thinking about is we want to also help them, and I think I mentioned it before, sort of stand up in their own right without being obnoxious. And I think you can do that. If something really feels off, or that somebody's asking questions that they don't really want to respond to, equipping them to say things that are not offensive and insulting, but also help them to respect their own boundaries.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's important.
One thing I thought of that my husband has done a really good job of doing, because he would like to bring our kids into his work sometimes, like bring your kid to work day or whatever. And one of
Mhm.
the things that he did teach our kids is to introduce themselves with a handshake.
Mm.
And that may seem a little bit antiquated or unnecessary for a child to do, but that's something that he has instilled in them. And over the years, especially even when we travel, like if we meet new people, he's like, you put your hand out and say, my name is, and you shake their hand. And that's the feedback we've gotten from people, is that they're really impressed by that. Again,
Oh
not to
yeah, it's
impress by
so
other
great.
people, but like, people are going to remember, if they meet 10 kids in the last 3 months, they're going to remember the one child that shook their hand and said, hi, my name is so and so, very nice to meet you. And then even
Oh
with a
my
follow-up
gosh.
question. So that was something that he just got in his head that he wanted his kids to do. And
I love it.
and yeah.
I just, that is a lost art. That is a lost art.
Mhm.
And you're reminding me, because again, I'm thinking back to when I was a kid. We had one of the ways my parents trained us to be polite was when we had home phones and you picked up the phone and you said, hello, this is Elise Daly. Who may I ask is calling? Like,
Mhm.
it may have been even more complicated than that, but that's what I remember of it. I mean, like, and I've actually been called out recently because of cell phone stuff by my own sister, who's like, I'll kind of go, uh-huh, when I pick up the phone. And she's like, hello, how are you? And it's kind of true, right? We've lost some of these niceties or formalities because of
Mhm.
some of the way we conduct our communication. But I think
Mhm.
a handshake, that's handshake, look you in the eye, that's gold.
I
I
Mhm.
don't
love
know if
that.
handshakes right now are acceptable, but they will be again because of COVID. Seriously, like
Yeah, totally.
people
Yeah,
are,
you're right.
but
But I love that too, because I really think like life is hard, and those to be able to kind of send your kids out into the world as these little moments of joy in some stranger's life.
mm,
I've seen, especially like elderly people will see my kids in the grocery store, and for some reason they'll just light up, and you see them kind of slumping along, whatever's going on. They see a little
mm,
kid, and they're just, oh, a child, and then have an interaction with the child, and then that brightened up their whole day. And like,
yes,
Yeah.
to be able to do that, I think is just a good thing. Like I said, life is
so
hard.
great.
You have that little moment in someone else's life is wonderful.
And
Yeah.
that's as simple as
Handshake from a kid would make my day.
but even as simple as teaching your kids to smile at people.
Mhm.
Yes.
To be able to walk down the street and look up at the person walking towards you and smile. That too can be alarming and wonderful
Yeah.
when people do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's something magical about lovely little kids. I don't know.
Mhm.
There's just something.
Mhm.
I
And
think lovely little everybody's big,
yes.
big, big adults too that actually walk down the street and smile at you and say
Yes.
Oh
hello.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Well, that's tied closely to the ability to focus and to be present. I would lump those all together,
yeah.
like read the room. Like when there's other people in the room, don't be on your phone. Don't be so easily distracted. You don't have to always be checking in to see what's going on. I mean, that takes training for a grown up, definitely takes training for an adult, but I mean, for a child, but that ability to focus and be present and be in the moment instead of, well, what's coming next? Well, what time are we going to be done? When are we going to be
Mhm.
out of here? And, our kids have asked us that. And I'm like, we're here. We're going
Yeah,
to leave when we're going to leave.
yeah.
Like, we know that you would like to do X, Y, and Z later today, but we're here now. And let's, because that doesn't make people feel great when you're already talking about the next thing,
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
like asking, when are you going to be able to leave? Like, nobody wants to hear that. I mean,
No.
even as a grown-ups, somebody's visiting your house and their kid can't wait to get out of there. Like, that's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for, the host. It's uncomfortable for their parents. And so, yeah, ability to be present in the here
Yeah,
and
that's
now,
good. Mhm.
Mhm.
and be aware of your surroundings.
Mhm.
I do want to say though, if this feels like we're giving you this long, long list of things you should be doing with your kids, I don't want it to feel overwhelming. I think one of the greatest things that we've done, and what my husband's done is he hones in on one thing and you work on that thing
So
for a
agree.
while, for a couple weeks, see if it works, follow up, be on top of that. It's too hard to be on top of all of these things all the time, especially if they don't come naturally to you and if they're not something that you already have in place. And so don't be discouraged by this list, but like think about what is it that we're looking to represent? What are our values? And are these, if I let my kid get away with this particular behavior, is that bringing us closer to our values or further away from our values? So just think of it as a like one step at a time, working those things into your family.
Yeah, I think that's essential. Otherwise, it gets completely overwhelming and you abandon ship.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So it's just like, what's one thing,
Hmm.
just that maybe it's just saying please when you
Hmm.
want something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And knowing that it's not going to be overnight. We had a conversation about something once, Kimberly, and you were saying how it took 2 years for, I can't remember, I think it was like
Chores.
chores. I have literally, since that conversation, I've reminded myself, like, Alana, took her 2 years.
That's right. That's
But
right.
just there's a freedom in that, in
Hmm.
knowing that it's not necessarily going to be some sort of, it's definitely not going to
I
be
was going
some
to say it sure as
overnight
heck isn't.
transformation.
No.
It's going to take time, and don't necessarily even put a time limit on it.
Hmm.
Just go,
Hmm.
this is what we're working on until it's where we want it to be, and then
Hmm.
we can work on the next thing.
Right.
Don't abandon it too soon, but you
Hmm.
know let it breathe, give it the time it needs to become a part of what your family is.
Yeah. So, what are some things that we can do that it will enable our kids to be liked? Or another way of putting it, what can we do to not enable the behavior that we don't like?
I do think we've talked about training,
Hmm.
role playing, setting them up before you get into a situation. This is what
Hmm.
it's going to be like, if you've, so I think there's preparation.
Hmm.
But I also think there's the download afterwards. If there has
Mhm.
been an
Mm.
incident or a situation
That's
where you've
good.
seen not what you wanted to see, really working on not making this a place of shame and condemnation, but really just saying, just want to talk to you about what happened in this scenario. And maybe instead of you shouldn't, all the yous, tell me a little bit more about maybe how you were feeling, whatever we've been able to observe, bringing it back and using it as a teachable moment instead of a
Hmm.
moment of blame and shame, and really, really following through. And it does take a lot of work.
Hmm. And I
It
think in
really
that
does.
conversation, it's important to share your why. Like, why is it important that you behave differently? Like, not this, you should do this because I told you you should do
Right,
this. Like, there's a
right.
reason. Like, I love you, I care about you. And yeah, this matters to me and us as a family.
Mhm.
I also like in those conversations, if it involved, directly involved another person,
Mhm.
to ask them to consider the experience that that other person had
Mm.
with the way that they
Mhm.
were being. How do you think? And I've said this before, family is the first society, right?
Yeah.
So that's your first opportunity. So when you have those sibling squabbles,
Mhm.
going, well, how do you think your brother would feel or is feeling with the way that you're treating him, or vice versa? How could
Mhm.
you treat him, and then of course when you say, treat him or treat her the way you want to be treated, and they say, well, I would want them to give me the toy.
Backfires.
So you got to base it on their age and stage and all of that,
Of
but
course.
Mhm.
definitely that post incident conversation of we're growing, not shame, of
Yeah,
course.
and
Mhm.
also how would you like to feel? How would you like somebody to treat you in that, yeah, which is basically what you're saying. It's just like literally if we can get our kids, that's hard for kids. They are
It is.
tend to be selfish little beings, but if we can, or self-centered at least, if we can really get them to think about how good does it feel when so and so does this with you?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's what we're doing for other people.
Mm-hmm.
We move in a world with people, and we want to be
Yeah.
able to move into that world nicely and well.
Yeah.
Yep.
I know I can think of times when I have allowed my kids to get away with things because it was just easier and I wanted to be liked by them and I wanted to be, maybe their friend prematurely. I mean, I know better. I know in my head that right now in this season, my job is not to be their friend, but I will often sacrifice respect to have them like me. And really, I'm just doing them a disservice and I'm just making it harder for me later on, right? Because it's hard to backtrack and it's hard to go, ooh, like we've been doing this for years, but we shouldn't have been doing. Although Alana, we talked about in a previous conversation about how you said this is, being honest and saying this is a standard we have and we haven't been following it, but now we're going to.
Yeah.
But so if we can, be willing to have, our kids dislike us temporarily or be angry with us after we've corrected them or coached them, we need to be willing to be uncomfortable so that the greater good and that long the future, the long game,
Yeah.
there's a better service that happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's such a thread of, and you had written this down, but a thread of delayed gratification, I think, in like everything that we've been saying in this on this topic of, it's good for them to experience delayed gratification. It's good for us. It's good for them to have goals and to be working towards things. It's just a good it's a good basic human concept.
Yeah. And I think when it gets wearisome, it's important to remember, we're not giving up on us. We're not going to, and even sometimes to teach your child that, we're not going to give up on this. We're going to do this and it's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
We're going to succeed with this.
Yeah. I think something that we get wrong is that, I've heard people say, you mentioned boundaries earlier, but I have heard people say that like boundaries hinders their creativity, their creative development, them expressing who they are. But I don't think that that's true. I think that there's something to be said. There's character to be built within boundaries. I actually find I'm far more creative when I'm given boundaries. Having to come up with solutions and having to practice restraint really allows me to flourish. And that holds true for our kids. We don't have to let them run wild, express themselves, express anger, express, discontent. That is not, that doesn't help them be more of themselves. How can we channel that into a different direction?
Yeah, that's I think one of the core issues that people face is this idea that running around crazy, being disobedient is being a kid or expressing yourself, or it's like it's their personality. And somehow obedient children came, popped out the womb obedient and lovely, or whatever, positive descriptors you want to put on it. And then disobedient children came out the same way, the opposite. So, there's really nothing you can do. It's like, oh, well, these people got lucky with their nice, polite children. And how do they do it? No one knows. It's unknowable. And these children over here are terrorizing everyone. And well, they're just, high spirited. So it's like, let's bring all of that down on both ends and, understand that, yeah, there's going to be some personality traits that might lend themselves more one way or another. My daughter is more of an introvert. She's just naturally more, what's the word? Not fastidious, but, conscientious. Like she cares. She makes her bed every morning. I do not make my bed every morning. Like, we are not the same in that way. My son is, what you might call pretty standard boy. Lots of energy, loves, Legos and video games and trucks and the whole thing. And so we actually had to help him channel his energy. when he was just a toddler in a way that we didn't have to do with my daughter, because they do have some, various differences that they came into this world with, but there still was intentional training involved with both of them. And so I think, if this kind of subtopic is, what do we get wrong? It's that idea that however they are is just how they are. And there's really nothing I can do about it as a parent without sort of suppressing them and putting undue burdens of boundaries on them that doesn't allow them to be who they really are. I think we need to take a step back from that and go, what is it of who they are, that's how God made them, that is maybe being suppressed or maybe being let wild with no restraint, where we can come in as a parent and, like Elisa is saying, training them and in the way that they should go, as the Bible says, but as Elise also said.
Yeah.
And then there's that scripture that says no discipline is pleasant at the time, right? What is that one? Is that the same? No.
I don't know. Sounds like a proverb, but
yeah. But I wish I had the rest of it. But basically that's true. It's like, it's not easy to do some of the training comes, as you're saying, Alana, some more naturally to some kids than others. It might take a little more work with somebody else who's just, their tendency is not to necessarily go along with the program. It's just, that's a little bit of a shock too. And when it turns out everybody ends up with their own personality.
Who knew? Every human being is an individual.
Exactly. And you have to come up with different ways of training them and different lengths of time sometimes. So
yeah. And our home is the perfect training ground for this. I mean, like, that is where the kids are going to make their mistakes. And that's where we get to train them. And that's where we get to say, okay, let's cultivate this in our own home under our own roof, because they're not going to be, we can't expect the kids to behave a certain way in public if we're not holding them to that standard in our own homes. And so how do they interact with family members? How do they interact with siblings? If they're doing it inside the home, they're most certainly doing it outside the home. And so let's think of it as a training ground, and let's, that's where they get to make the mistakes. That's where they get to, like, get their reps in and hone their skills and seize the opportunities you have to teach them these things.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think we sometimes think that at home you can just let go of everything you've ever known and just, treat people and furniture and whatever any way you please. But out there, outside of your home, you have to act a certain way. And I don't subscribe to that idea. I think that, obviously, you're not going to walk around in your underwear outside of your home. You might, burp a little more freely at home, but the way that you treat other people has got to be the same at home as it is out there. Or how are you going to learn it? How are you going to, and like you said, how are you going to make mistakes and learn from them? You're going to make mistakes, but how are you going to recover well from those mistakes if you're only making them out there with people who are not going to take the time to help you with those mistakes?
Yeah,
true.
Yeah, that's good. All right, ladies, any last thoughts on this?
No, I feel like there's kind of a few really good takeaways, like, one thing at a time, and really having an intentional idea of what you want, what are the things that you really want to cultivate in your family, and not giving up until you've gotten there.
That's a good summary. All right. Well, thank you, ladies. This has been a great conversation, and I'm going to be working on a few things with my kids.
Me too. Oh no, I can't.
I know. You're
Too late for you.
Too late for us.
Subtle sneak attacks, like set the example. That's That's
Well,
the thing.
yes,
Set
There
the
you
always,
example.
always,
Yes.
always.
So even as a mom of grown children, we can set the example,
Yeah.
you
And
know?
I've failed many times. So there you go. Good
We all have.
reminder.
We all have, I'm sure. All right. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Mhm.